Moving on then, and we talked about how there was a little bit of a COVID issue there, but a team who had a COVID scare at the beginning of the tournament was Spain. Sergio Busquets tested positive, and then there was a false positive for Diego Llorente, but he overcome that. Spain kind of underwhelmed. I mean, particularly in those first two games with the two draws against Poland and Sweden. Couldn't really find that killer touch, couldn't find that killer shot, because I think there's been a lot of killer passes which have kind of been squandered and have been wasted. And that sort of brings me on to the final player, which is Pedri, who is, I mean, we talked about Billy Gilmore being 20 years old and sort of dictating in midfield. Pedri's 18. He's younger by 2 years. And he's already at Barcelona. He's a fantastic number 8. For me, he's hugely impressed. And I think if Spain had, if they'd converted even half of their gilt-edged chances, we'd be talking a lot more about Pedri at this tournament. And just going back to what you were saying about Damsgaard and packing stats and whatnot, I really be interested to see Pedri's packing stats for this tournament, because I mean, but after the first two games, he matched Toni Kroos for final third passes, completed balls into the final third, which, after 2 match days, to have 36 completed passes each into the final third is, to be matching Toni Kroos. It's ridiculous for an 18-year-old, but hey, he did. And granted, teams were probably sitting off Spain a bit more than the sides Germany were playing, but the next player after that was Jordi Alba on 24, so there was quite a drop-off. So not taking anything away from Pedri, he was excellent. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of him. Lee, I mean, what's kind of been the overarching assessment from you on Pedri?
He is a lovely, lovely player. It's just as simple as that. It takes a lot, I think, it takes a lot for a player to become part of a national team setup at this age and to have the impact that he's had. But don't forget, he's also done the same thing this season for Barcelona, which is huge. Um, he wasn't a surprise. I think that there are a lot of people who were a little bit unsure of who he was when he appeared. There are still people out there who will believe that he was a La Masia graduate, and he isn't. He wasn't a surprise last season. His numbers, was it Las Palmas he was with? His,
Yeah.
his numbers were extremely good, and within a couple of first team appearances, Barcelona had already agreed the deal to take him to the new camp. But even then, I mean, I thought that he would be on the periphery of the first team, maybe even some B team matches in there. But his absolute quality shines through. You think about the midfielders that Barcelona have had that haven't quite made the breakthrough from La Masia, Carlos Elena, Ricky Puig, fantastic talents, absolutely top class talents. But Pedri has the ability to become generational, and I think that's the difference. He reminds me of a quote that I saw once from Sir Alex Ferguson when he talked about the integration of young players into a first team squad, a first team group, and he said that the first team recognise quality, and if a player is good enough, it doesn't matter how old they are, the group will accept him. And I think he was talking about, was it Ryan Giggs at the time, when he took Ryan Giggs into the first team at Manchester United. And you see the same thing. The key test for me is that Lionel Messi has straight away built up an incredible connection with Pedri, and that tells me that Messi rates him, and that tells you a lot about the quality that this kid has. But just a little aside from a scouting perspective, for any people who are wondering, as a scout, as somebody who analyzes players, who uses data especially extensively, if you're a club and you're using data, you should be aware of every player under the age of 19 who's making first team debuts across the key markets and key leagues that you're tracking in Europe. And that's how Barcelona, obviously they were aware of Pedri from before, but that's how a lot of people, that's how I became aware of Pedri, because I was tracking to see which players were making debuts in the Spanish second division. Saw Pedri, had a look at him on Y-Scout, and I was just blown away by what I saw. I think that he is an incredibly intelligent player, and going forward, he's going to be one of the key players for the Spanish national team and Barcelona for the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, he was 16 when he was playing for Las Palmas,
Yeah, exactly.
which is ridiculous because even at that point, you're kind of not at the development checkpoints that you'd need to be at to compete physically in men's football. But he was doing it because he was just a level above technically, and then in terms of tactically, he was very very intelligent from a young age. I mean, he still is young, but just as by way of sort of a background, he's Tenerifian. He comes from Tenerife in the Canary Islands. And yeah, he was with Las Palmas, as Lee said, at 16, 17 years old. And there he predominantly played as a left winger or an attacking midfielder,
Yep.
which he doesn't play as much now. He did sort of at the beginning of his time at Barcelona, at the beginning of the 2021 season. But he's kind of towards the end of the season, he kind of dropped in to become a bit more of a number eight instead of in that final line. He's now dictating the first phase of an attack as opposed to the enacting the second phase.
Exactly.
He's been given license to pick those passes which break the opposition's midfield line whenever the centre backs don't, which I simply love because he's kind of he's a safety net that if the likes of Laporte and Pau Torres don't break the lines, then they've got Pedri there to do it for them. But going into a bit of background on Pedri, I was amazed to find that he didn't join Las Palmas until 2018. So
Yeah.
the last time Spain were at a major tournament, Pedri was still playing for Juventud Laguna, who were a local team. This isn't some La Masia kid who's been groomed in the way of the Spanish playing football by elite coaches at an elite academy. He's a proper grafter with sort of immense natural talent. And one of my favorite stories about Pedri is that he was rejected by Tenerife, who obviously they're a Segunda División club. They produced Jose Perez, who obviously came over to Newcastle, is now at Leicester City. They rejected him for being small and skinny. Only for them then to realize the error of their ways, try and sign him again, to which Pedri allegedly said, "But I'm still skinny and tiny," according to the club's president, and then he joined Las Palmas instead. And obviously from there, he's gone on to sign for Barcelona, which is a great story, I think. But he's at the Euros, sort of going back onto how he's performed with Spain. My observation is that he's receiving the ball with the midfield and forward line yet to be broken. So he's receiving it as an eight as opposed to a number 10, where some people may prefer him to be. I think you do lose a bit of how kind of flighty and intelligent he is between lines, but at this point, he is creating from deep. We talked about the final third passes. He's very good at building those moves from deeper areas. Um, some may argue that unlocking him completely, he might need to be played a little bit further forward. But I think while you've got Dani Olmo in the team, who's a very similar player in terms of style, I don't think you necessarily need need to have Pedri further forward. I mean, that may be the reason that Spain have been a bit underwhelming. So maybe I'm incorrect, but take nothing away. I think he's been, given the circumstances, an 18-year-old in a major tournament. I think he's been brilliant. That he's been given license to really show what he's about.